Bucket lists, strengthening those family bonds. Have you ever wondered how to get your entire family excited and aligned about a big holiday or a collective goal? Join the Bucketlist Accountant himself, David Patterson, as he delves into the powerful concept of integrating kids into the process of creating a family bucket list. We discuss the significance of involving children, even older ones, in planning meaningful family trips and how it boosts their sense of ownership and excitement. This episode is filled with lots of practical tips, including teaching kids about planning, savings, and the true cost behind making dream holidays and unforgettable experiences come true. I'm your host, Anthony Pearl. Let's get into making your bucket list happen. David, I wanted to talk to you about an important idea, bringing kids into the whole idea of the bucket list. So talk me through how important that is, and then how you actually go about doing that.
I think this is really important on a few levels. One is that getting the whole family involved just creates that extra level of excitement. And it also, I think, gives the rest of the family some ownership and some buy-in about what you're doing as you go along. And this is something that we're doing at the moment. So just to take a step back, we had a fairly big family trip planned in 2021. And we weren't able to do it because of COVID. So we've parked that, but we're just starting to reintroduce that now, to have a holiday next year, a fairly significant holiday. And what we've done is we've sat around initially, and 5 of us in the family, myself, my wife, and 3 kids. And we're actually nominating a destination that each of us would like to go to. And then we're trying to, as best we can, build that into a family holiday. I mean, our kids are older. Our youngest is 19 and our 2 eldest are 23. So it's effectively for us a bit of a celebration of the family that we've built over the journey and where we're at the minute, and giving them some buy-in as to where we go and what we do, rather than us just telling them, hey, next year in October, we're going to go to America for 6 weeks, or, it just builds in a much greater buy-in from everyone. And it's exciting. It's great to be sitting around the table and going, we're going to go here. We want to go here. Bringing it together might be challenging depending on where they choose. But in the first instance, we've just said, sort of write down a couple of spots you want to go to, and let's work together to try and build a family holiday. And it just creates a real sense of excitement around it, which is awesome.
Half the love of doing that is in the planning, right? It's the looking forward to it and doing those things. But as you alluded to, and I've we've discussed it off air, that I've got kids of a similar age, and we did exactly that trip a year ago. And we pretty much chose a country that we wanted to go to and spent 6 weeks traveling, which was amazing. But it does change, doesn't it, as the different ages of the kids. And so bringing the kids in a bucket list when they're at that sort of, late teens and 20s is a very different story to when they're quite young.
Oh, absolutely. For us, there's going to be a whole heap of logistics about bringing them all together as they start to, head out into their own lives. But I think one of the things giving them a bit of buy-in and a bit of ownership in our case will do is it from their perspective, because they'll have the sense of ownership of what we're doing, is that they'll work a little harder to make sure that they can have the time and the capacity to be able to join us and do the trip. When the kids are younger, you don't have that problem as such about them going off on their own. But the sense of excitement and ownership that it still creates at that stage, I think it's an additional memory that gets created about the trip that wouldn't be there otherwise, especially for the kids, because I guess generally family holidays are decided on by the parents, and then the kids go along with it. Whereas this way, kind of, I think it definitely builds in an extra element of happiness from the kids' perspective that they've been able to contribute to a holiday.
Yeah, and I can imagine well, I remember from when the kids were younger, of course, the dream was, "Let's go to Disneyland. We want to go to Disneyland," when it came to holidays. But I mean, I suppose the question it really is how you go about bringing up that whole idea of a bucket list and being a reasonable one as well, because there's a difference between, well, let's just go travel for a year and stay in 5-star hotels everywhere,
Yep.
and let's have a something that's a realistic goal. As well, because again, when the kids are younger, they don't appreciate the financial side of things.
Oh, 100%. But I also think that at 23 and 19, I don't think that they have a full grasp on the financial side of
They don't.
things either, and maybe even worse at that stage. But for us, the process that we're taking is that in the first instance, we're not putting any limits on where they want to go or we've got a time frame, so we can back in a 6-week time frame. But in the first instance, we're not limiting where they want to go. So we're starting sort of top level, and then as we work through it, because we're really only in the early stages of this at this point in time, but as we work through it, there'll need to be, I assume, a little bit of refinement, a little bit of negotiating between us all, so that we can end up with a really smooth trip that kind of flows reasonably well and doesn't sort of leave us completely destitute as well. But so there'll be certainly a process, and hopefully what it does for our kids too is kind of teach them this process of some of these things you need to plan for, some of these things you need to save up for, and that the work that gets put into it makes the trip more enjoyable at the end of the day, because you've sort of know what you've had to do to actually achieve that goal of your holiday. And I think the other thing it does too, from a business owner's perspective, is that when you plan this trip with the family, and depending on the age of your children, but to try and impress on them that there is a financial cost involved in this, and that it's not just happening. I think the other thing that it will help to do is that when you're at work and working, if you're having to put in a few extra hours here and a few extra hours there to help get towards that goal, that the family understands that it's not mum and dad just working for the sake of working. They're working the extra hours. They might be working a weekend here or there because they're trying to get enough money put together so that we can go on this holiday. And I think it creates an element of understanding of the additional work that might be involved.
Yeah, there really is that differentiation, isn't there, in trying to make them understand what's the different levels of finance and the sacrifice. I think the
Yep.
sacrifice is a huge thing, because it's easy to get criticized by kids and saying, "Dad, you're always at work," and not appreciating why you're always there. I mean, we hope that we do the jobs that we love, and so we genuinely love being there.
Yep.
But that's not the reason that's keeping us from family time sometimes.
Sometimes that's right. I mean, yeah, that's exactly right. So, you don't have that, oh, mum's always working or dad's always working. It steers more towards mum and dad are working this weekend, but they're doing that because we're going to, in this time next year, we're going to have a 6-week holiday, and they understand that the sacrifice will be worth it. The short term, not seeing mum or dad for a few hours here or a few hours there, will be worth it in the long run, because we're going to get to go on this trip, and we're going to go to this place, like Disneyland as an example, where as the kid really, really wants to go to. I was always promised that if we ever won Tats Lotto, mum and dad would take us to Disneyland, and we never won Tats Lotto.
Does that mean you haven't been yet and you've still got to go?
I took myself at 22 or 23, a mate and I, we took ourselves to Disneyland. And even at that age, Disneyland was awesome.
I did the same thing. Maybe we were there at the same time. I did exactly the
Possibly.
same thing with a couple of mates at around the same age where we went to Disneyland. I was lucky enough though that 10 years prior my parents had taken me to Disneyland.
Ah,
So yeah, no, it is a lot of fun. Did it on my honeymoon as well. It was also fun. So
yeah, no,
um
it's a good spot.
yes. But I suppose I wanted to ask you as well when it comes to kids and the bucket list and bringing the family together. I mean, we talk about holidays, which are usually fairly significant expenses, but how important is the concept of the bucket list at a much smaller level? Because if you're a little kid and you see something on TV, because they love advertising lots of kids' toys and things on TV, is the getting the latest whatever it is that a version of a bucket list for a child that's worth talking about and bringing into that concept?
I think it certainly is, and again, it probably depends on the age of the child and all that. But I think the more you can build in the bucket list concept, and again, I'm not saying this is easy, but the helping them to prioritize what it is that they want. So if they're starting to build a list of things that they want to do, and then the newest toy comes along on TV and they say, "Dad, can you buy me that? Can I have that from whatever the case is?" That you can sit them down and have a chat and say, "Well, if you get the toy, you may not be able to learn to play guitar, or you may not be able to do something else that you really want to do that's on your list of things to do because the toy costs money and that then takes away from something else." So I think if you can build that in as you go along, and I think the earlier you can introduce it, the quicker that concept will build into them. Again, it's never easy with kids to get them to wait for things, but I think if you can factor that in as much as possible, I think it certainly helps in the long run. And I think it'll help them build a really good philosophy on life going forward too, in that they'll kind of learn that they can enjoy life as they go along and they can have those little rewards along the way, but also keeping in mind the bigger picture of the bigger rewards they want to do as well.
This podcast is brought to you by bucketlistaccounting.com.au. Speak to David Patterson and his team if you want to take better control of your life and business, helping small business owners like you be successful designing the life of your dreams. Go to bucketlistaccounting.com.au or check out the show notes for more information. Now back to the program. What I love about this whole concept of the bucket list is it kind of replaces that other dirty word that no one wants to talk about, which is budget. It's a better B word, isn't it? I mean, it's serving a similar purpose in some respects, but it's taking a different perspective on it because budget tends to have people in that concept of thinking about, well, it's all about restrictions.
Yep.
Whereas bucket list is utilizing the same thing, but working towards things that you want.
100%. I think we did it early on when our kids were younger and earning pocket money, I guess, in the first instance, is that we had an idea of saying, okay, well, if you're going to earn whatever, $5 a week, $10 a week, let's put $1 of it away or $2 of it away into a savings account and keep it for a rainy day. But the rainy day never had a definition of what that meant. Whereas if we're talking about, the kids want, I keep going to the guitar, but if the kids want a new guitar or they want a new bike or they want to, the budgeting becomes not budgeting, as you said, but it becomes a saving plan for the new bike, or it becomes a saving plan for the new guitar, or it becomes a saving plan for whatever it is they're after. And because there's a specific goal in mind, you're less to think about it as a restriction and more about a plan for a future purchase. It becomes a lot easier to put the $1 or $2, or as you're getting a bit older, $100 a week away into a bank account because it's got a specific purpose attached to it.
Yeah, the rainy day concept is a difficult one, isn't it? Because you do want to live for today and not wait for when you define that as being the tough day, the rainy day, because what actually defines that? And
Yes.
it is a really interesting idea, isn't it? Because it's been something that's been embedded culturally for, I'm sure, for many cultures over the years. Is you've got to put stuff towards a rainy day, but no one ever defines the rainy day.
No, that's right. And I think even on a bigger picture, that rainy day, it kind of links into retirement at the same time as well. Like historically, people have worked and worked and worked and saved for retirement, and the retirement age becomes when you start to do all the things that you couldn't do whilst you're working. So it's a distant kind of concept of retirement or rainy day that doesn't have any kind of specific definition to it. Whereas if you've got these goals along the way and clear savings plans, then I think it makes it a lot easier to do it. And that's not to say you can still enjoy the journey as you go along. But there's an extra element of knowing that there's something bigger down the track that you're working towards as well, so that any sacrifice that you do make, you know that there's a purpose behind it.
And just from your experience to wrap up this kind of conversation, what do you see as being that's worked, particularly when the kids and bringing the family together? Is there a way that really works to bringing them into this concept and giving them some buy-in? And how often do you have to check in with it? Because again, depends on the nature of the item. There's a difference between buying a small electronic device and going on a large holiday. So how often, how do you bring them in initially, and how often do you check in?
I think, that's a good question. There's probably a couple of layers to this. One is, your bucket list is an ever-growing and ever-expanding item, really. Things are popping up all the time that you hadn't thought about that you want to do. But I think visual representation becomes really important on some of these things. So if you've got a target of saving $600 for a new bike, and I don't know how much a new bike would be, but let's say that's what it is, and putting up a visual representation of how much you've saved on the fridge or on a wall, and then it's just a continual process of every time they put some money into that savings account, the little line or they color it up, so you can really see how they're traveling with it. And especially if you've got a target date of when you want to be able to do it, you can really kind of see how they're traveling, check in, see if they need a hand with something. But the visualization of everything, I think, is really, really important.
Yeah, because it does lead you to then celebrating those little wins along the way. And is that something that your role in working with these, families, is that something you're checking in and making sure that they're acknowledging those rewards?
Oh, absolutely. If the clients that we're working with on a quarterly basis, those personal goals and achievements factored into the whole meeting. So we're reviewing business performance and we're checking in and seeing how they're going with their goals at the same time, because it's all, from my perspective, it's all linked in, and one's equally as important as the other. So we're certainly checking in regularly on how they're going, both on a business and a personal perspective.
The Bucketlist Accountant podcast is brought to you by David Patterson and his team at Bucketlist Accountant. Go and visit their website for more information, details, of course, in the show notes. I'm Anthony Pearl, your host from Podcast Done For You. We look forward to having your company in the next episode.